Did you guys know that I was really anti-gun at first? Especially when I started my YouTube channel. It's due to the fact that as a Romanian, we used to have a Second Amendment. But then when the communists came, when the Red Army from the Soviet Union came, they confiscated the guns from the people. It was one of the first things that they did. And due to that, Romania still has, up until today, one of the most restrictive gun legislations in the world. And because of that, the people are genuinely afraid of guns. Like, if you were to put a Glock on my table right now, for me, it has an aura of dread. It creeps me out just by knowing that it exists there. I remember when I traveled to the London International Airport and I saw a couple of police officers and they were carrying weapons. Just the fact that they're next to me, even though they were supposed to keep the peace and they were supposed to keep me safe, but just the fact that they're next to me, it, again, creeps me out. And this is true for most Romanians. So the question is, like, how did a person like me become an advocate for the people having guns, even though I'm still afraid of them? And the answer is that once you study enough politics and once you look a little bit at history, you kind of notice that the thumbnail that I placed actually makes sense. And the easiest way to explain it is by using an analogy. Imagine a neighbor asks you to take care of their dog when they're gone. And in return for the time that you are allowed to feed the dog, you get to live in your neighbor's mansion. Imagine he's got a mansion like Hassan Piker or some of the BLM activists, right? So a very beautiful place. And you get to live there, even if it's not yours. And all you have to do is to take care of his dog. Now, your neighbor has like this really big, vicious dog. He's quite scary and intimidating. And you have to go every day and you have to take care of it. You have to feed it. You have to play a little bit with it. You have to make sure that that dog is happy. But it's very scary and intimidating. Are you going to mess with that dog? Like, are you going to try and get it hungry? Are you going to try and antagonize it? Like, of course not. Chances are you're not going to fuck around and find out. Like you're going to be very respectful whenever you go and you feed that animal. But I imagine the same situation, except that the dog is muzzled on a leash and tied up in a kennel. Well, all of a sudden you can do whatever you want, right? Like, you can disrespect the dog. If you forget to feed it 1 or 2 days, who cares, right? So my point is that obviously there is a relationship of respect when the power balance is somewhat equal. Like on one hand, you have the power because you get to feed the dog. But on the other hand, you also realize that the dog is strong enough in order to get angry if you do not fulfill your responsibilities towards it. And in a normal and healthy relationship, like, every person is going to try to take care of the dog, but you do realize that there are some people out there, which, they exist in the world and they're not very nice people, and they would try to take advantage of the situation. They might go into the neighbor's house just to enjoy the luxuries and the benefits that are being offered for being there, while mistreating the animal. And the reality is that even those people wouldn't mistreat it if the animal is vicious versus if the animal is muzzled and tied up. And it's the same with governments, and it's the same with people having access to weapons. It's not that the people will necessarily rise up against the government, but it's just that the government won't fuck around to find out. Like, they don't want to go there. Because you have to understand, the government is made by human beings as well. And some human beings are good, others are evil. But take into account that it's very dehumanizing when you do statistics. Like, most people who work in the government are pencil pushers. They do not see the effects that their law have on the general public. For them, it's just numbers, it's letters on a piece of paper. So the incentive to be evil is a lot higher because you can view yourself by doing good while doing evil and just signing a piece of paper. So this is why, like, countries that do have guns rarely have authoritarianism, or if they do, the people consent to that authoritarianism. So the reason that I'm bringing it up is because I've noticed especially now in Australia and in Ireland, you have like these very interesting laws that are being passed, which are more akin to an authoritarian government, a dictatorship, than a free and liberal society. And listen to this for a bit.
It sounds like a Black Mirror episode. The police can enter your home unannounced, search your phone and computers, and arrest you for the things that you're reading, watching, or posting online. If you refuse, you could be sentenced to 12 months in prison. But it's not a Black Mirror episode. It's worse than that. It's real life. At this very moment, the government of Ireland is trying to pass a law before Christmas that will let the police go into people's homes and confiscate their phones and computers.
And the reason it matters is because we get to see the same stuff being pushed in Australia. And worst of all is that most of the public agree with it. They think it's a good thing. And I'm thinking, like, why is that, though? Because my parents wouldn't think it's a good thing. And chances are your parents wouldn't think it's a good thing either. Like, back in the day, the concept that the government could go through people's mail was unthinkable unless they had a court order and it was something of an extreme circumstance that they would even consider it. The idea that the government would bug people's phones was something that only the Soviets would do, right? Like, you would think, oh, that's some communist shit. Like, why would you even consider doing that? And I thought about it, and I think, like, what I came to the conclusion is something which also explains why many governments are okay with crime. It's either that they're ignoring certain crimes, they're not taking them seriously, or in some cases, like in the US, you have states that actually pass legislation to encourage criminals. Like, for example, if you shoplift less than $900, then you can make sure that a police officer doesn't chase you. You know, like ridiculous stuff like that, which, to me, it seems that if Don Corleone himself managed to get into power and wanted to help criminals, I don't know what more he could do than the Democrats have already done. So there is this question, like, why is it that any person that has power would allow this to happen to its citizenry? And the conclusion that I came up with is people are more willing to put up with this shit, with having, you know, your phone confiscated and looked into, if they're afraid. So what I mean by this is, I happen to live in a, you know, particularly nice neighborhood. The worst things that can happen is that my neighbor's dog gets out of the leash and comes and takes a shit on my porch. And that is the drama of the month. Like, that is the extent of evilness that can transpire in my neighborhood. Or maybe a neighbor parks a car the wrong way, and it makes it difficult for the others to get out to work because he didn't park properly. You know, like, these are the extent of dramas that are taking place here. And if someone was to suggest that the government should go into my neighbor's house and look at his phone, I would definitely be against that. I would be like, why, are you crazy? Like, why would you want to do that? Like, leave my neighbor alone. Like, Mr. Anderson didn't do anything. Why do you want to do these drastic measures? Like, such a huge invasion of his privacy. Like, are you suspecting him of a crime? No, then leave him alone. Right? So you don't really feel the need to crack down on your neighbor's rights in that situation. You also don't care about what your neighbors are talking about, right? Like, if Mr. Anderson starts spewing hate speech towards other people in the neighborhood, you'd be like, well, yeah, but he's Mr. Anderson. You know, like, he never does anything wrong. Like, he doesn't try to break any windows. He doesn't try to get into any of our houses. Like, he just talks a lot of shit, right? So in a safe society, you do not feel the need for safety. You do not feel this need that the government needs to crack down on other people's basic rights. But imagine now that my neighborhood would be a violent one. That every day there's news about another break-in. That every day when I get outside of the house, there's some people that are willing to mug me. And then you find out that there has been a murder. Well, all of a sudden, if the government says that they want to go into Mr. Anderson's house to see, like, maybe he actually supports the burglaries. Like, maybe he actually is in favor of this. A lot of people will say, yeah, sure, go in Mr. Anderson's house, and if he's got nothing to hide, then he has nothing to fear. If the government says, well, we need to go into people's houses so that we can check if they didn't steal anything, a lot of individuals be like, well, yeah, my shit was stolen, so maybe they're responsible. Yeah, okay, like, go in. And I think, like, this is why a lot of governments do not tackle crime, is because when you have high crime and people are afraid, they're more likely to put up with this authoritarian shit. But more importantly, notice that these things can't be done in places like the US. Because if the police was to, start going from house to house in order to check people's laptops and phones, they actually risk getting shot. Like, you can get into the house of a person that's crazy, and if the police don't get shot, then maybe that guy gets shot, and then the police appears on the newspaper. So basically, when people are afraid, especially if they're not armed, they will demand for the government to protect them. Now, if the people are armed, and take into account that not very many want to steal from Don Corleone, right? Like, they would rather steal from the old lady across the street. They wouldn't break into Don Corleone's place. Why is that? Right? So, like, if people aren't armed, then they can't defend themselves, so they have to ask defense from the government. The government is more than willing to provide, except they're not really interested in stopping the crime. They're more interested in expanding their reach and authority. So that is my thesis, my opinion on why crime isn't tackled. It's like, think about it this way. When Chairman Z wanted to visit California, the streets were cleaned within a couple of days, which shows that they can do it if they want. And you also get to see, with the white supremacy content on the internet. Like, when they wanted to clean it up, it got cleaned up. So the government at this point has the technology and is capable of actually tackling down crime. Like this idea that it just happens and the government can't know, I don't buy it. So it's got to be malice rather than incompetence. And the reason for it is to pass legislations like this, to be able to see what people have on their phones, what people have on their computers. Like, from what I understand, in Australia right now, I had an Aussie telling me this, so I haven't fact-checked it. Take it with a grain of salt. I'll have to look into it before my live stream to see if it's true or not. But basically, they're trying to push against encryption. So, like, if they demand to see what's on your phone, and you don't allow them, because you have a password or something, and they demand that, okay, well, show us your password, and you go like, no, they can put you in prison. Even if, like, at the court, it's proven that you didn't have anything on your phone that was even remotely problematic. So you had, like, no hate speech, you had, like, I don't know, no anime, right? You had no My Hero Academia there, you had no Jinx from League of Legends, right? Like, your phone was safe. No hate speech, no nothing. And just because you refuse to allow them to see, you can still break the law. I mean, that's a society more close to the Soviet Union. It reminds me when Russia invaded Ukraine, you had, like, some anti-war protests in Russia, and the police was going in, like, checking their phones to see if they don't have any slogans or anything posted online that was anti-war, right? Like there were people walking on the street, and the police wanted to see if they're part of the protest or not, so they wanted to see their phones if they filmed anything. I think, like, that's the correct and just moral liberal society that we're heading towards. Let me know what you guys think, though, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.